Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I thought we would continue with the suggestions passed to developers for December of 2024, and this time it's time to have a look at the naval side of things. There's actually a ton of really cool stuff in this one, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. If you want to check out the past to developers, I've left a link in the description which shows all of the different articles and all of the different vehicles if you want to see. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure to subscribe, and let's get started. The first vehicle is the USS New Mexico, the BB-40, specifically the one from 1943. The USS New Mexico was the first battleship to have been armed with the upgraded 14-inch guns. Instead of having 14-inch 45s, it has 14-inch 50 caliber guns. These guns were longer barreled and offered a higher muzzle velocity, and therefore means that their armor penetration capabilities was increased too. The turrets themselves were also completely redesigned, being less crammed and also potentially offering a higher fire rate than its predecessors. Architecturally, the New Mexico class is also kind of interesting. First of all, you have the early US battleships that had a lattice masts. Some examples of this would be the North Dakota and the Wyoming, and then later they sported tripod masts, which you can see on stuff like the Arizona and the Texas. And even later than those, you had the angular towers, which we'll see in the future. New Mexico is different though, having received a brief architecture style between said tripod masts and angular towers. In fact, the New Mexico superstructure shared a striking resemblance to the Japanese pagoda masts, as seen on battleships like the Congo, for example, so would actually look different. Also, when it comes to the 1943 variant specifically, the reason it's recommended is because all of the US battleships are currently either pre-war or late war in the game, so having a mid-war US battleship would be nice. In this configuration, New Mexico also retained an interesting, albeit not excessive, armament. It retained a number of the casemate guns on the main deck level and numerous secondary 5-inch guns along the superstructure. The autocannons consisted primarily of 20mm, as well as a few 40mm autocannons, and also has an awkward aft turret mounted catapult removed, as well as the rather useless range clock, which was mounted on the superstructure. It did retain the aircraft catapult behind turret 4, and also the standard armor values for the machine, which was about a 340mm belt and 330 bulkheads. This vehicle also had access to 12 14-inch cannons in 4 turrets, which would be nice to see too. For Germany, we have a destroyer, the Type 1936A, the Z-23. This was the first of the Type 1936A destroyers built for the Kriegsmarine. It was laid down on the 15th of November 1938, launched on the 15th of December 1939, and commissioned into the Navy on the 15th of September 1940. It was the first destroyer to be launched during the Second World War for the Kriegsmarine, and thus was not given a name, only an identification number. The A's had been designed as improvements on the previous Type 1936s. It had been felt that the previous destroyers were lacking in firepower to take on the British Royal Navy, and so the new destroyers were to be fitted with a higher caliber set of weapons to hopefully mitigate this deficiency. The 1936As were to be fitted with 5 15cm cannons with 3 single mounts and 1 twin mount. Due to the difficulties encountered with the twin mounts, single mounts used on all of the Type 1936A ships were until approximately 1942, where the 4 single mounts would be swapped for a twin. They carried 2 quadruple torpedo launchers with 8 G7A torpedoes in total. The ships were divided into 16 watertight compartments and were fitted with a double bottom that was about half the length of the ship. They had 2 propeller shafts powered by 6 superheated boilers for a design speed up to 36 knots. For the Soviets, we have a river monitor, the Project SB-12, the Udarniy. This was actually the only ship made of its class and also the first Soviet river monitor that was around. It was originally designed in 1930 as a floating battery for use on the Dnieper before being reclassified during construction. Its hull was based on a Russian Shkval-class river gunboat featuring a modern structure with super-firing turrets and turreted secondary guns. Because the hull was meant to be extremely shallow, Ammo was stored inside the turret barbettes, which were lightly armored. Despite the attempts to save weight, miscalculations led to the actual draft being about half a meter more than designed. The ship proved to be too large for the actual river. Udarniy was completed in 1934, originally with German engines, and in 1939 it underwent a major modernization, with its engines replaced with stronger domestic ones, and soon after was transferred from the Dnieper flotilla to the Danube flotilla, becoming its flagship. By the German invasion, it was based at Odessa. Unfortunately, it still had the same obsolete anti-aircraft weaponry it was designed with, which meant its doom was to be sunk by German bombers off the Tendra Spit, defending the coast from amphibious landings. In 1983, its wreck was salvaged, with parts taken and placed into memorials or museums. This vehicle had access to two single-mounted 130mm guns, also two dual 45s, and four quad 7.62mm Maxims in the M4 mount. For Britain, we have one of the Fiji-class light cruisers, specifically the HMS Fiji. This was the lead ship of her class and was laid down on the 30th of March 1938, launched on the 31st of May 1939, and then commissioned into the Royal Navy on the 5th of May 1940. Sometimes called the Colony or the Crown Colony class, the Fijis were basically a smaller version of the preceding Town class. Developed due to the 1936 London Naval Treaty, the idea was to squeeze the capabilities of a town on 2,000 tons less displacement, the displacement limit for new cruisers being 8,000 tons compared to the previous 10,000 of the 1922 Washington Naval Treaty. The lowered displacement but similar requirements left the Fijis very cramped, leaving little space for improvements going forward. While appearing mostly similar to the towns that came before them, the Fijis had a number of changes both internal and external. Compared to the former, the funnels and masts were straight, and the ships were fitted with a transom stern. The 6-inch turrets were revised, becoming slightly heavier and more cramped. Internally, the armor scheme had been revised, covering the ammunition spaces in exchange for the armor around the machinery spaces. Ammo handling for the 4-inch guns was also revised, the complex mechanism for the towns being removed. At the time of a sinking, which unfortunately was in 1941, Fiji would have been equipped with the Type 279 and Type 281 radars, along with a high-angle control system for AA gunnery. During her final refit, it was also fitted with the Type 284 gunnery radar and an extra pair of quadruple Vickers 50 AA mounts. This vehicle had access to 12 6-inch cannons and also 8 4-inch guns, along with 8 QF 2-pounder pom-poms, along with 8 12.7 Vickers Mark IIIs and some torpedoes too. The maximum amount of armor on this vehicle was found on the belts and the deck, and also the magazine, which was 89mm. For Japan, we have another Akizuki. This is specifically the Akizuki-class Destroyer, the JDS Akizuki. The Akizuki class was ordered by the U.S. Military Aid Program in 1957. The ship was financed by the offshore procurement of the United States at the time. However, the design and construction of the ship was domestic in origin. And so, in 1957, the ship, the JDS Akizuki, was laid down by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries at Nagasaki Shipyard. Akizuki was then launched in June of 26, 1959, not long after the ship was commissioned on the 13th of February 1960, and registered in the US as DD-960, though in Japan it was registered as the DD-161. In 1961, Akizuki became the flagship of the 3rd Self-Defense Fleet, which replaced the JDS Yukikaze. Then, in 1963, the JDS Fleet Command moved to the land, and the flagship was abolished. So, it was transferred to the Escort Fleet Squadron as a ship in direct control. It also replaced the JDS Teruzuki as the flagship of the Escort Fleet in the same year. Over time, the ship received upgrades and changes, such as in the 3rd of March 1968, depth charge and launchers removed, and they equipped the VDS, which is the Variable Depth Sonar, and in April of 1978, the Mark 108 anti-submarine mortars and short torpedo launchers were removed and replaced with the Type 71 Bofors rocket launcher and triple short torpedo launcher. In March of 85, the flagship of the escort ships, which was the Akizuki, at the time was transferred over to the JDS Murakumo, and the Akizuki was changed to a special service vessel, and its hull number changed to ASU 7010. Not long after its assignment, it was put into the Yokosuka District Force, and not long after this, in March of 87, it was again changed assignments, now into Fleet Research and Development Command, where it served as a ship for testing. During the new assignment, the Akizuki in 1989 trialed a tactical towed array sonar, and it also removed the third turret of the 5-inch gun in order to test that new system. The Akizuki was then decommissioned on the 7th of December 1993 and was scrapped, ending its long career. The vehicle had 3 Mark 39 54 caliber 5-inch dual-purpose guns, also 2 Type 68 50 caliber 3-inch twin quick-firing guns. It also had an anti-submarine launcher, a depth charge launcher, and also a bunch of other launchers on top of it. They'd also had a bunch of torpedo tubes as well, and went through many different refits, adding different setups to it. For Italy, we have the RN San Giorgio, specifically from 1940. The Giorgio was an armored cruiser of the Regia Marina, which participated in the Italian-Turkish War and subsequently in the two World Wars and the Spanish Civil War. The ship was launched in 1908 and entered the Navy ranks 2 years later. And the ship was used as an improvised artillery battery during the Italian-Turkish War to protect convoys, and in the Great War, the ship was used in attacks against ships of the Austro-Hungarian Navy. After the First World War, the ship was then used for voyages to South America, and with the outbreak of the Civil War in Spain, the ship was used to escort the Italian troops supporting the Spanish nationalists. Between 1937 and 38, the ship was modernized at the La Spezia shipyards. Almost all of the light armament was modified, the torpedo launchers were removed, and some of the heavy artillery was replaced with new pieces. With the outbreak of the New World War and the heavy age of the ship, despite the modernization, it was assigned to the defense of Tobruk as a floating coastline anti-aircraft battery. Shortly after the start of hostilities, the ship was forced to defend the city from English air attacks with notable success due to its heavy anti-aircraft armament. And in that period, the tragic killing of Italo Balbo by friendly fire occurred. On the 21st of January 1941, the ship suffered a heavy air attack by the British, but managed to escape with some minor damage and shot down 47 enemy planes in a single day. On the same day, the ship found itself isolated from its Allied command due to English attacks, but continued heavy fire until it was scuttled by the captain. The ship's motto was Protector et Vindicator. The ship had heavy, if quite antiquated, armament. On 2 twin armored towers, located one on the stern and one at the bow of the ship, there were 4 254/45A Mod 1907 cannons of English origin. It also had 8 190A Mod cannons from 1908, and these were placed on smaller but always twin towers. The anti-aircraft armament consisted of 10 100mm guns in twin turrets, 12 Scotti Isotta Fraccini 20 Modello 1939 guns in twin systems too, and also 10 Breda Mod 31 machine guns in twin systems. With this armament, the ship could give quite heavy anti-aircraft fire for the time, despite the lack of large calibers. The ship was powered by 8 oil boilers and 2 reciprocating engines. There were also 2 18,200 horsepower propellers on the drive shaft, and they were only 2 funnels. Despite this, the ship reached a speed of 18 knots and had a maximum range of 5,741 kilometers. For France, we have a destroyer. This is Le Hardi. The Hardi class itself isn't a well-known series of destroyer, mostly because it was barely finished when the war ended in France in 1940 and saw little action. During the 30s, the French Navy was trying to find a way to rearm its fleet to compete with the rest of the major European powers. Although the Washington Treaty had limited the size of its fleet and the scope of its modernization, the biggest problem was the speed at which rival fleets were developing. Be it the Regia Marina or the Kriegsmarine, both were modernizing at an alarming rate. The appearance of the Deutschland-class convinced the French Navy to build 2 battleships to confront that new threat. Those would eventually be Dunkirk and also Strasbourg. However, they didn't have any modern escorts, and so the construction of a new kind of destroyer was decided. It was the 1772 TW class of destroyers, following the restrictions of the Washington Naval Treaty. They needed to be fast over long distances and have an armament powerful enough to deal with any smaller threat. Thus, the Hardi class was born. 8 of those ships were built between 1937 and 40. The Hardi, Fleurot, Epée, Mameluke, the Casque, the Lansquenet, the Flibustier, the Corsair, and another 4, which were under construction when the armistice came in summer of 1940, the Intrepid, the Téméraire, Opiniâtre, and also Aventureur. After extensive trials, it was the first of its class to be commissioned along with the Fleur in 2nd of June 1940. Its first operation was to cover the escape of battleship Jean Bart. After that, it joined a car where it was present during Operation Menace. It fired 60 rounds of 130mm at the British fleet, drawing fire while putting smoke screens up to protect battleship Richelieu. It came out of the battle unscathed and even picked up a downed British pilot while still being under fire. The ship was upgraded after Operation Menace and got more AA defense. An important note, it was supposed to be equipped with the brand new 37mm MLE 1935 AA turret, but wasn't able to. After that, it made several voyages between France and the French colonies until its ultimate demise in November of 1942, as it was scuttled along with all its sister ships and the rest of the fleet to prevent from falling into German hands. This vehicle had access to 6 130mm cannons in dual mounts, 2 37mm, 4 13.2mm, and also 7 550mm torpedoes. And then we have the Almirante-class Destroyer. In 1951, as neighboring rival Argentina was poised to acquire an aircraft carrier, Chile entered negotiations with British shipyards to build 2 modern destroyers, equipped with heavy anti-aircraft armament to counter Argentinian naval aviation. Vosper Thornycroft and Vickers-Armstrong submitted designs, with the Vickers proposal being chosen. This order came at the expense of the modernization of Chile's battleship Almirante-La Torre, which had also been contracted to Vickers-Armstrong. The design of the new Almirante-class destroyer was based on the Daring class, but with modern weaponry, systems, and amenities. The main armament was the new Vickers Mark NR automatic 4-inch gun, which had only been released in 1955 and was designed for anti-aircraft work. The Almirante class would be the only ships to be equipped with these weapons, as they were rejected by the Royal Navy and other export designs, with this gun failing its bids. The secondary armament was 6 L-70 Bofors, and there was also a set of torpedo tubes and ASW mortars. The radars were the latest Marconi and Signal models, and the ship was fitted with new specially designed HVAC systems. 2 more Almirante-class ships were also considered in 1965, but Chile opted to purchase 2 Leander-class, called the Condell-class, frigates instead. Vickers also attempted to sell a similar design to Colombia, but it was vetoed by the British Foreign Office as part of some weird naval politicking with Sweden to make them sell destroyers to Colombia instead of Indonesia. The 2 ships were laid down in 56 and 57 and named Almirante Williams and also Almirante Riveros, respectively. They were both completed in 1960 and commissioned into Chilean Navy soon after. The 2 ships differed slightly, the Almirante Riveros having a lattice stern mast, and these ships were refitted in 1964 with 2 Seacat SAM launchers replacing 2 of the Bofors. In 1975, they were refitted again, this time with Exocet SSM launchers replacing the torpedo tubes. In 1986, they were refitted for the last time, with one of the 4-inch guns removed to make way for the helipad. The ship would serve until 1995 to 96, and they would be expanded as targets in 1998. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.